The wind howled across the frozen wasteland like a wounded beast, clawing at calibb reins with fingers of ice that bit through the seams of his jacket. His breath steamed in the air, ragged and shallow, every exhale a small surrender to the team that surrender to the cold that gnawed at his bones. Snow crunched beneath his boots, deep and heavy, threatening to pull him down with each step. The world was white and gray and endless, broken only by jagged rock formations that jutted from the earth like the ribs of some long-dead giant. He didn't know how much farther he could go. His ship was gone, smashed into a scatter of twisted metal and scorched hull panels miles behind him. His emergency beacon flickered but wouldn't transmit. He had a half-dead medkit, a nearly drained pulse pistol, and a voice cracking with frost. Survival wasn't guaranteed anymore. It was a question he asked with every step. And still, he kept moving. Something pulled at his attention a line. Across the snow. Dark. Jagged. Unmistakably red blood. He stopped, heart thudding harder than the cold could dull. It painted the snow in broken streaks, half covered by new snowfall, but still visible if you knew how to look. Instinct took over. Not the kind that screamed run, but the kind that said help. The kind that made him a medic, even now. He followed the trail, knees stiff from cold but legs still moving. The blood led him to a rock outcropping half buried in ice, the entrance almost invisible unless you were looking for it. He crouched, pulled aside a layer of wind-packed snow, and found a shallow cave mouth hidden beneath it. Cold air flowed from within, but it was still warmer than outside. He didn't hesitate. Inside, it was dark and narrow. His boots scraped rock. He moved deeper, the wind's howl dimming behind him. That was when he saw her. She was slumped against the far wall, curled into herself, her body battered and bloodied. White fur, matted with dried crimson, clung to her like a cloak. Long limbs bent at awkward angles. Her ears were torn. Her breathing was shallow. She wasn't human. Not even close. She looked like something out of myth, a beast made of snow and shadow. Thick tail curled tight. Sharp claws stained with blood. A predator. A monster. And yet, her face was turned toward the entrance, as if she had been watching. For someone. As if she had waited. Calibb single quotes S hand hovered over his pulse pistol, then dropped. He didn't reach for a dot. Instead, he approached slowly, kneeling beside her, unfastening the straps of his medkit. The moment he reached for her side, a low growl rumbled from deep in her chest. Her ears twitched. One eye cracked open sapphire. Piercing, intelligent. He froze. The look she gave him wasn't wild. It wasn't feral. It was tired, alert, defensive. She was ready to fight if she had to, but there was something else behind her gaze. Something more than instinct. "You're hurt," Calibb said, voice hoarse. "Let me help." She didn't move, not forward, not back. He took that as permission. His gloves moved quickly. He cleaned the wounds, noting the depth of the gashes. Something big had torn into her, multiple times. And she had survived the fight. Barely. He used the last of his cauterizing gel, pressing bandages into place, working in silence. Her eyes never left his face, not once. When he finally finished, she let her head rest against the stone again. Her breathing evened out just a little. He sat back on his heels, shaking. He should have left. Should have saved what little energy he had left for himself, but he stayed. Outside, the storm shifted again, and Calibb felt it, the prickling sense of being watched. Something else was out there. Something still hunting, but inside this cave, under this roof of jagged stone and flickering firelight, he had made a choice. He had found someone left for dead and refused to let her die alone. He didn't even know her name. Not yet. The fire crackled weakly, a flickering orange thread against the deep cold pressing in from the cave walls. Calibb sat hunched beside it, arms wrapped tightly around his knees, trying to ignore the sting in his fingers. His gloves were soaked through. His bones ached with exhaustion. Across from him, the alien girl lay unmoving, her body half curled against the stone, bandages darkened with blood but no longer leaking. She was alive for now. He kept his eyes on her, unsure why he hadn't left the moment she passed out. Maybe it was the medic in him. Maybe it was something else. She hadn't spoken, hadn't tried to communicate. But the moment their eyes met, Calibb had known. She wasn't just some wild creature. Something in her gaze had stared right through him, and she'd let him touch her. She could have killed him. His thoughts were broken by a low rustling sound. Her tail twitched, then again. The movement was subtle but deliberate. Calibb sat up straighter, eyes narrowing. Her breathing had changed deeper now, aware. Then, without warning, she moved. In one fluid motion, her body shifted off the cave wall and she surged forward. Calibb barely had time to react. Her weight crashed into him, driving him flat on his back, the firelight casting flickering shadows around them. His breath fled his lungs. Her claws pressed gently but unyieldingly against his shoulders. Her face hovered inches above his. Those same sapphire eyes, brighter now, locked onto his with an intensity that made his pulse spike. Her fur bristled along her neck, ears twitching. Her breath was warm against his skin. "You touched me," she growled. Calibb blinked. The words weren't perfect, but they were clear. Her voice was low, rough, like stone dragged across metal. Alien, but fluent. "I was helping," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Her tail curled tightly around one of his legs. A slow, deliberate motion. Her eyes didn't waver. "Now you are mine." The words slammed into him harder than the fall. He stared up at her, struggling to process what she meant. Mate? Ownership? Was this some kind of territorial claim? "No," he said, more sharply than intended. "That's not how this works. Not for me." Her ears flattened slightly. Her claws flexed. She wasn't trying to hurt him, but the message was clear. She didn't understand or didn't care. "You touched," she repeated, slower this time, as if speaking to someone simple. "Your kind, do you touch without meaning?" "Yes." He snapped, then hesitated. "I mean, not like that. Where I'm from, helping someone doesn't mean we don't bond that way." Her brow furrowed, confused, or offended. Maybe both. "You are strange," she murmured, "but I felt it, your scent. Your blood, your breath." She leaned in slightly. "You were alone. Now, you are not." Calibb felt heat crawl up his spine. The logic was alien, primal, but something about the way she said it stirred something deeper, something he didn't want to name. He tried to shift and her grip tightened. "You will run?" she asked. "I don't run from patience." Her ears flicked. Her head tilted. "You are not afraid of me? Should I be?" She stared at him for a long, long moment. Then, without warning, she moved back. Not far, but enough to let him sit up. Calibb rubbed his shoulder where her weight had pressed into him, keeping one cautious eye on her. She crouched near the fire now, claws resting on her knees, watching him like a hawk. "Do you have a name?" he asked. Silence. Then, "Juno," Calibb nodded. "Calibb." She didn't repeat it. But she didn't forget it either. They sat in silence for a while, the fire between them the only barrier in that strange, delicate truce. Outside, wind tore through the rocks. Calibb's thoughts raced. He should have been planning his next move, how to fix the beacon, how to get off this planet, how to survive another night. Instead, he kept thinking about those eyes, that growl. The way she had spoken with absolute certainty, like fate had already made a decision and she was just honoring it. He didn't understand her, didn't trust her. But he couldn't bring himself to leave her either. Suddenly, Juno's ears perked. She turned her head toward the cave entrance, her nose twitching. "What is it?" Calibb asked, tensing. She didn't respond. Instead, she rose silently to her feet, stalking toward the entrance like a predator who had just caught a scent. Her body was still healing, but her movement was smooth, lethal. Calibb reached for his pistol. The wind howled louder now, sharper. Then came a sound, soft, crunching, distant. Calibb stood beside her. Whatever it was close. Too close. Juno's voice was a whisper. "They come." "Who?" She didn't answer, but the fear in her eyes wasn't for herself. She was afraid for him. The wind outside didn't howl anymore, it whispered. Cold and sly, like it was warning them of something it didn't dare name. Calibb tightened the grip on his pulse pistol, the weight of it suddenly insufficient in his hands. Juno stood beside him, tall and still, her white fur rustling gently in the breeze curling through the cave. Her wounds were fresh but sealed, her body tense like a coiled spring. He'd seen soldiers brace like this before. Back on Helion 4, the silence before a breach. That feeling in your gut when something was coming, but you didn't know from where. Then. A sound, faint. Deliberate. Snow crunching under a heavy foot. Calibb raised the pistol, scanning the jagged shadows beyond the cave's mouth. Juno hadn't moved. Only her ears twitched, turning like radars. Then a snarl. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a blade, and the shape that emerged from the storm, it wasn't small. It was massive. Calibb stumbled back as the thing stepped forward. Into view. It had to crouch just to enter the cave's narrow throat. Its eyes burned gold, set into a hulking head of jagged black fur. Scars crisscrossed its snout. Fangs like knives jutted from its mouth, dripping with steam. And its claws. Those weren't just natural weapons. They'd been reinforced. Tech. Fused into bone. Artificial splicing. Combat-grade evolution. "What the hell?" Calibb whispered. But Juno was already moving, not running. Not hiding. Charging. The collision was thunder. Stone cracked under their weight as they slammed into each other, snarls echoing off the walls. Calibb fired, but his shot went wide. It was too fast, too chaotic. Claws tore through the air. Blood hit the rocks. Not Juno's. She fought like something with nothing left to lose. Calibb dove to the side as the beast slammed her into the wall, claws digging into her ribs. She responded with a savage rake of her own, catching its throat. It shrieked, staggering. Back, she pounced, sinking her fangs into its shoulder, wrenching sideways with brute force. It howled. But it wasn't beaten. Not yet. The thing twisted violently, throwing her off. Juno hit the cave floor hard, gasping, and Calibb saw her shoulder bend the wrong way. His heart jumped. Without thinking, he moved. He didn't aim. He pressed the barrel to the monster's ribs and fired point blank. It roared, stumbling. That was all she needed. Juno surged up from the floor, her body broken but burning with rage. She leapt onto its back, claws digging deep, fangs going for the neck. This time, she didn't miss. A scream echoed through the cave as her teeth tore through tendon and windpipe. The beast thrashed once, twice. Then it fell. The silence returned, heavy and strange. Calibb stared at the body, its blood steaming in. The cold air. Juno staggered off it, breathing hard, one arm hanging useless at her side. Her fur was matted with gore. Her ears twitched. And then she looked at him, not like a comrade, like something else. Calibb lowered the pistol. "You okay?" Juno didn't answer. Instead, she stepped toward him. Not stumbling, not limping. Stalking. "You fought with me," she said, voice low. "You were losing." Calibb replied, still breathless. You chose, she said, more insistent now. Her eyes burned. You stood beside me. He opened his mouth to argue, to explain that wasn't what this meant, but she closed the distance, her nose almost brushing his. Now it is done. Caleb's heart pounded. Done? The bond, she whispered. His stomach sank. I didn't agree to anything. Her claws lifted, just one finger touching the spot above his heart. You did, she said. You bled with me. He backed up a step. Juno, that's not how my people. She didn't follow. Instead, she crouched beside the fire, her body shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion. From pain, from restraint. You can fight it, she said. But it has already begun. Outside, the snow fell again, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He had seen the look in that creature's eyes. It wasn't hunting food. Had been sent to finish something. To silence someone. And Juno. She hadn't been running from predators. She had been running from her past, and now it had found them both. The cave had gone silent again, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence that followed a scream. Blood cooled in a slow pool beneath the monster's body, steam curling off it like something dying twice. Calibb sat against the wall, pulse still, hammering in his throat, his breath catching with every shallow inhale. His pistol was back in his holster. Juno hadn't moved since collapsing beside the fire. Her body trembled from exhaustion and blood loss, her dislocated shoulder jutting at an awkward angle, but her eyes never closed, not once. He wanted to speak, to ask her what the hell that thing was, why it had come, if there were more. But the words stayed behind his teeth. Instead, he pushed himself up, wincing as his knees cracked. He moved to her side slowly, carefully. When he reached toward her shoulder, she didn't growl this time. She watched. He wrapped one hand gently around her forearm, the other bracing her collar. On 3, he said, voice low. 1, 2. Before he reached 3, he snapped the joint back into place. Her body jerked, a sharp snarl leaving her throat, but she didn't strike him. Her claws only dug into the stone beside her. You're welcome, Calibb muttered, already reaching into his kit. He had barely enough left to manage basic triage. One half-used roll of bandage, a burnt-out stim patch, and his last vial of painkiller foam. He hesitated, then handed her the foam. She didn't ask what it was. She just bit the cap off with her fangs and downed it like it was water. You're a terrible patient, Calibb said. You're alive, she replied. He huffed. That was fair. An hour passed. The fire dimmed to glowing coals. Calibb set to work building a new one with the bits of charred bone and debris from the beast they'd killed. Juno lay motionless, but her eyes tracked every movement. Finally, as he dropped the last piece of fuel onto the embers, she spoke. We must leave. Calibb looked at her. You can barely stand. They will send more, she said. He didn't need to ask who. He remembered the way the monster had moved. It wasn't just hunting. It had been tracking her. Something in its eyes recognition, not of him, of her. Why? He asked, sitting beside her. Who were you running from? Juno didn't answer right away. She turned her head toward the cave entrance, where the snow still fell in hushed spirals. Her claws flexed. Her breathing deepened. Then, finally, my pack. Calibb blinked. The same kind as you? Not the same, she said, voice tight, no longer. He waited. And slowly, the words came. She had once belonged to a war pack, a bonded unit from her species, bred for strength and loyalty. They didn't choose mates. They were assigned. Pairings were dictated by bloodline, by strength, by the needs of the pack. But Juno, she had refused. The one chosen for her was cruel, dominant, brutal in his victories and entitled in his expectations. When she rejected the bond, She was cast out. Not merely abandoned, but marked. A traitor, a deserter. A wild one. They called me broken, she said, her voice like stone. Said I betrayed my blood? Calibb swallowed hard. So they hunt you now? They hunt what I carry. He narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Juno reached into the satchel strapped across her back, pulling out a small curved metal object, smooth, almost organic in shape, silver and humming faintly with energy. Calibb leaned closer. What is it? A core, she said. Data. Secrets. Maps. All from their dens, their labs. I took it when I ran. His chest tightened. So they're not just angry about the bond. No, she said simply. They want it back, and they want me dead. Calibb stared at the core, then at her. Then back at the fading fire dot. So much for keeping a low profile. He stood, moving to the cave entrance. The storm had passed, but the sky was still gray, heavy with ash and frost. He scanned the horizon, and there, just beyond the far ridge a trail. Smoke. His ship, or what was left of it. He stepped back inside. My wreck isn't far, he said. If we're going to move, we go now. Maybe there's something left. Tools, power cells, anything. Juno rose slowly. Her body still screamed protest, but her legs held. Calibb packed what little he had. His pistol, his medkit, the empty beacon. You don't have to come, he said, once they were ready. I can go alone. Juno looked at him. You are not. Alone, and that was that. They stepped into the cold, into the wind. Two fugitives, one hunted for knowledge, the other for the crime of helping her. They moved fast, the trail behind them already disappearing under falling snow, but something watched from a distant ridge. Glowing amber eyes, narrowed in the blizzard. And a clawed hand reached for the sky, signaling. Not just one scout this time, a whole pack was coming. Snow crunched beneath their boots and clawed feet as Calibb and Juno pressed forward through the endless white. The sky above was a flat sheet of gray, no sun, no shadow, just cold. Always cold. Each gust of wind scraped at their skin like sandpaper, biting through layers like they were nothing. Calibb's breaths came in short puffs, visible and fast, but he didn't slow. Juno moved beside him, one arm cradled against her ribs, her wounds still raw beneath the fur. They didn't speak. There was no time got ahead. The twisted wreckage of Calibb's ship finally came into view. The starboard hull was embedded deep in a frozen slope, metal torn and blackened from impact. Loose panels and debris littered the clearing, scattered like bones from a great beast that had fallen from the stars. Calibb didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, scanning for anything salvageable. Power units, signal boosters, maybe even parts of the beacon's primary relay. Juno followed, slower, her eyes never still. She wasn't looking for supplies. She was watching the horizon. There's got to be something, Calibb muttered, yanking free a scorched console from beneath a heap of snow-covered plating. The beacon core was still intact, fried, but not beyond hope. He could fix it. He had to. Juno's ears twitched. She turned sharply toward the ridge. Calibb noticed her stillness immediately. What is it? Her voice was quiet. Too quiet. We are not alone. He turned, heart slamming into his ribs, hand already on his pistol. He scanned the snowy slope, eyes sweeping the storm-hazed terrain. And then he saw them. Shapes. 3 at first, then 5, then more. Emerging from the fog like phantoms. Tall, furred, armored. Their bodies moved with discipline, not hunger. They didn't snarl. They didn't charge. They stalked. They surrounded. Juno took a slow step forward, her claws flexed but held low. Her breath came slower now, not from fear, but from control. She wasn't surprised. They found me. Calibb raised his pistol, How many? Juno didn't look away. Enough. A figure stepped forward from the pack, larger than the others. His fur darker, eyes glowing amber, scars across his throat. A long ceremonial spear in his hand. Calibb didn't need Juno to tell him. This was the one she had been forced to bond with, the one she refused. He stopped 10 feet away, tail flicking once behind him. Traitor, he said, his voice like gravel ground through frost. You live. Juno didn't flinch. You came to kill me. Again. He smiled, and the expression had no warmth. No, this time we came to reclaim you. Calibb stepped in front of her. She's not going anywhere. The pack tensed, claws twitching. Several let out low growls. The leader turned his gaze on Calibb. Human, this does not concern your kind. I think it does, Calibb said. When you send monsters into caves after her. When you tried to murder her in the snow. The leader's lips curled. She took what was not hers. She rejected her oath. She spilled clan blood. She made a choice, Calibb snapped. That's not a crime. The leader lifted his spear slowly, the blade catching the pale light. In our law, it is. Juno stepped forward beside Calibb, blood still drying across her fur. I won't. Return, and you won't take what I carry. His eyes narrowed. Then you die. The signal was subtle. A flick of the spear. The pack lunged. Calibb barely had time to fire before the first warrior was on him, claws slashing. Juno moved faster, leaping into the fray, intercepting the strike meant for Calibb. Her body crashed into the attacker, sending them both into a tangle of fur and stone. Calibb rolled, took aim, and fired into another charging warrior. The pulse blast struck center mass, knocking the creature back. He turned, just in time to duck a swipe that would have opened his throat. Juno fought like fire unleashed. Even wounded, she was faster, deadlier. Her claws tore through fur and armor. Her teeth snapped with savage purpose. But they were outnumbered, and they were losing ground. Fall back. Calibb shouted. Juno didn't move. She tackled the leader. Directly. The two of them slammed into the wreckage, metal groaning under their weight. The leader roared, his claws raking her side. Juno struck back, blood flying. The spear dropped to the snow. They wrestled like beasts born of rage and war. And then, silenced. Juno stood over him. One claw pressed to his throat. He was breathing hard, bleeding. But he didn't beg. He looked up at her with something between hatred and reverence. You chose the human. He rasped. Juno nodded once. I chose. His eyes burned. Then you are nothing. She leaned in, her voice colder than Aslanoninin. The ice beneath their feet. Then I am free. She slammed her claws down. The battle stopped. The pack stared. None moved. Not forward. Not back. Calibb lowered his weapon, chest heaving. Are we done? He asked, voice hoarse. One by one. The pack turned away. Silent. Retreating into the snow. Abandoning their fallen leader. Abandoning her. As the last one vanished. Juno dropped to her knees. Calibb rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. Okay, she nodded slowly. Now, I am. He helped her sit by the fire, wrapping what little fabric he had around her wound. They didn't speak again for a long time. Above them, the sky began to break, just enough for light to shine through. Not warm, but enough to see by. The snow had stopped falling, but the cold was heavier than ever. It sank into the bones, into the silence, into the breath that fogged and vanished before it could warm the air. Calibb crouched beside the fire, feeding it the last of the scavenged. Hull plating and broken paneling. Thin blue flames hissed and spat but held. The wreckage offered little more than cold metal and memories. Now memories Calibb didn't want to carry. Juno sat nearby, wrapped in the shredded remains of a thermal liner. Blood had dried in streaks down her side, but she didn't flinch, didn't complain. Her eyes followed the flicker of flame, but her mind was elsewhere. The pack was gone. The leader, the one she had once been forced to bond with, was dead. She had chosen her path, but the weight of it hadn't left her shoulders. They won't come back. Calibb said quietly. Juno didn't respond, he added. You made your stand. They saw it. Still nothing. Then, finally, her voice low, calm, but far away. I was raised to believe strength was everything. Obedience was survival. We fought, we mated, we lived by order. Purpose was decided, not chosen. Calibb watched her. He didn't speak. She looked up at him, her eyes sharper now, but not hard. Then I saw you. No orders, no alpha. No duty but the one you gave yourself. And yet, you stayed. You bled for me. He exhaled. You don't owe me anything. I didn't say I did. That surprised him. Juno shifted slightly, the firelight catching the fur around her face. She looked tired, yes, but not broken. Not afraid. You still wish to leave, she said. Calibb hesitated. His gaze turned toward the ruined beacon on the ground beside them. The alien core Juno had stolen, no, preserved, sat beside it. Together, he could fix the transmitter. Maybe, but his silence answered her. You should, she added, not looking at him. This place, it doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget. And you? He asked. Her head tilted. What about you? I will remain, she said. The exile, the traitor, the one who didn't bow. He frowned. So that's it? After everything, you just survive alone? She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned back on her elbows, her eyes following the drifting ash. Then she asked softly, if your ship came tomorrow, would you go? The question dug deeper than it should have. Calibb stood, pacing a few steps toward the edge of the ridge. The horizon stretched wide, empty, cruel. All he had to do was get that beacon working, call in a dropship, get warm, get home. He turned back to her. She wasn't watching him anymore. Her gaze was on her own clawed hands, scarred and bloodied, as if she didn't know what they meant anymore. I don't know, he said. She looked up. But I'm not going anywhere until that beacon works. And when it does, I'm not leaving without saying it to your face. Her ears flicked once. What? Whether I'm staying or not. They locked eyes again, and Calibb saw it, the wall, the armor, all those instincts bred into her too. Distrust, to dominate, to survive. Crack. Just for a moment, she looked away first. You're strange. So I've been told. They both sat quietly for a while, listening to the wind scrape across the metal bones of the dead ship. The next morning, Calibb tore the beacon apart and began again. Juno hunted, brought back something with tusks and razor hide. They ate in silence, rebuilt in silence, learned in silence, but it wasn't empty anymore. Then, one night, clearer sky, distant stars blink in cold light down, she asked him the question he hadn't been ready for. Your kind. How do you choose? He looked at her. Choose what? Mates. His mouth went dry. She was watching him, not with hunger, not with possession, with curiosity. Something quiet. He swallowed. We don't do it with blood or dominance. Or fights? Then how? We decide, he said. We trust. We grow. We try. Juno looked away, nodding slowly. Her claws traced a pattern in the snow. And if they leave? Sometimes they do, he said. But sometimes they stay. She didn't speak again. Neither did he. But that night when the fire died down and they both lay in the half-sheltered hull, her tail curled just slightly over his leg. Not a claim, not a command. Question. And he didn't pull away. He let it stay there. The stars above burned quietly. And the beacon light. began to blink again. Slow, steady, alive. The beacon pulsed steady now, each flicker a heartbeat of hope rising from a grave of frozen metal. Calibb stared at it from the slope, his hands covered in wire burns and grime, breath steaming in the windless dusk. It had taken days. Days of salvaging, jury-rigging alien tech with human parts, rerouting circuitry with thread-sized cables and the occasional prayer. But it worked. It was broadcasting, and with every blink, one truth became harder to avoid. He could leave. He stood beside the hull, the cracked fuselage catching the silver glint of moonlight. Behind him, Juno crouched at the fire, feeding it bone slivers from the last creature she'd brought down. She hadn't spoken about the beacon, not once. He watched her in silence. The way her eyes never left the flame, the way she chewed without tasting. Her body had healed, mostly, but inside her. He wasn't sure. Finally, he approached. The signal strong. Someone will hear it. She didn't look up. He sat beside her anyway, the warmth of the fire brushing against his frozen cheeks. After a moment, she spoke. When they come for you, what will you tell them? He stared into the flames, the question sitting heavy on his tongue, the truth. She turned her head slightly. That you saved me. That you fought beside me. That you broke your laws and risked your life for someone who shouldn't have mattered. He looked at her now. Truly looked. You do matter. She didn't blink. Not to them. Then to me, he said. That's enough. Juno looked down, her claws curling into the dirt. You choose me then? She asked, her voice nearly a whisper. Not because I claimed you. Not because I bled for you, but because you choose. He nodded once, the wind brushing his hair like a soft answer. Yes. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when they opened again, they glistened, not with weakness, but with something unspoken, something that didn't need teeth to be strong. Then I release you. He blinked. What? She stood slowly, tail flicking, her back to him now. If you choose me, she said, then you must be free to walk away, without debt, without guilt, without a scar that binds. Calibb rose too, stepping toward her. Juno, I'm not asking for permission to stay. I know, she said. He reached out and took her hand. Her claws didn't retract. They didn't need to. He held them anyway, but I'm also not running. For a long moment, they just stood there, her breath in rhythm with his. The fire crackled behind them. The beacon pulsed on. Then a sound. Of fa-fa. Hum. Soft at first. Mechanical. Far away. He turned toward the ridge there. Cutting through the darkness, a light. Not the cold shimmer of stars. Not ASTORMFRONT. A ship. Calibb single quotes S chest tightened. They came. Juno said nothing. He turned to her, heart beating hard against his ribs. I need to go to them. Explain. She nodded. Double quotes. Will you wait here? Another. Nod. He hesitated. Then stepped forward and touched her forehead to his. I'll be back. She closed her eyes. I know. Then he walked. Through the snow. Up the slope. Toward the blinking light and the search beam sweeping the wreckage. The ship hovered low, skimming the icy terrain, engines muted. A rescue craft smaller than a destroyer, but armed. Standard protocol for unknown territory. When Calibb reached the beacon, the loading ramp dropped open. Two armored figures stepped out, rifles low. Identify. One barked. Double cal TL Avatem Rains. Field medic. Crash survivor from freighter Helix 9. They stared, then checked a scanner. You're 2 weeks overdue. I know. They didn't ask much more. Protocol took over. Body scan. Weapon check. Basic vitals. One of them noticed the claw marks along his jacket. What the hell hit you? It's a long story. he said. As they motioned for him to board, Calibb hesitated. Wait, what is it? He looked back over the ridge, the cave, the fire. There's someone else. The soldier frowned. Survivor? Kind of? They didn't understand. They didn't have to. I'm not leaving without her. It took an hour to convince them. It took longer to return. When they reached the cave again, Calibb stepped forward first. Hands raised. Juno stood in the doorway, watching. The soldiers stiffened. One started to lift his weapon. No, Calibb said sharply. The soldier froze. What is that? She's the reason I'm alive. Juno stepped forward, her movement calm, deliberate. No threat. Just strength. You'll have to clear her. Through protocol, the soldier muttered. Quarantine, species bioscan, diplomatic permissions. Then we start now. Calibb said. Juno looked at him. Your world won't want me. Then we make a new one. She studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped onto the ship beside him. Weeks passed. Juno didn't speak much aboard the ship. She observed, listened, adjusted. She refused restraints. No one tried. Her eyes did. The talking. Calibb stayed near her, explaining customs, food, why the floor hummed at night. Slowly, she learned officials debated her entry for days, classified her, debated again. But then came the report from Calibb, his words, his witness, and the recovered data core that exposed Warpack's experimenting on alien populations. His truth and her betrayal of her own kind became undeniable. They gave her provisional status. Not citizen, but not prisoner. It was enough. Calibb didn't return to active duty. He filed for discharge and applied for a colony license on a fringe. World far from the noise. Months later, under a twin sunrise on the edge of nowhere, he built the first shelter. She built the second. When travelers came, they asked what species she was. He just said, mine. Juno never claimed him again. She didn't need to, because he had already chosen.